This tool was made in partnership with the Summer Matters campaign and the National Summer Learning Association. So we'll dig into what elements are here and how to use this tool for your program. But before we do that, I want to just get into some logistics so people know how to use this Zoom platform in case you're unfamiliar. So this page, this slide that you see right now, talks about the controls that you have. If you don't see it, if you hover your cursor across the bottom of the screen, a gray band will come up, and then you'll see these icons. So how to mute and unmute yourself, how to turn on and off your video cam. If you click the icon that says participants, you'll see everyone who is participating currently and whether or not they're muted. You can also use that icon to give me a sort of tap, like that'll blink at me that you have a hand raised or you have a question. You can also tell me to speak louder, speak softer, slow down, anything like that with that participant tab. Those controls are also in the chat box. So if you move over, you'll see the icon for chat box. And that will open up like a box of just ongoing text. You can message me, you can message other people directly that are participating on the webinar. If you have questions during the part of a presentation, feel free to put questions in that box. And then I'll just be monitoring that box to track questions. If we can't get everything answered today, it's also a good place to record questions and something that I can follow up with you on, because it'll also tell me specifically who asked the question, so I'll know who to follow up with specifically. And then just to help make this webinar run smoothly, we have a few protocol items. It's listed last, but I want to say first that this webinar is being recorded. We would like to share it with other districts and summer programs that weren't able to participate during this time but are interested in using the Quick CASP and the assessment tool and thinking about how to assess the quality of their summer learning program. So we do want to make it available to others even if they weren't able to make this time in. So it is being recorded. And so you probably noticed when you logged on, you're immediately muted automatically. So when it's time for people to chime in, just make sure that you know you need to unmute yourself. And again, there are two places to do that in the chat box next to your name and in the participant. Oh, and actually, if you have the video cam bar up and you're seeing everybody who's on in their video cam, if you hover in the top right corner, there will also be an unmute and mute button. Ideally, if you haven't used Zoom before, you might want to use a headset because headsets are more stable for listening and using the microphone and not having background noise. So if you can use that, unless you've already tested out your computer audio, and it's fine. And then again, just use chat box for questions during presentations, but there's so few of us now that there will be opportunity for people to actually share out if need be. So I will pause and pause for questions and let people speak. Okay, so objectives and agenda. We have 3 basic objectives. I'm hoping that everyone in this webinar will be able to summarize how to use the Quick CASP and then describe at least one domain. So when we get into what the Quick CASP is, hopefully you'll know what a domain is and then be able to describe at least one of them in detail. Maybe even 2, we might have time to do that. And then at last, I'm going to leave you with some website resources so that you can dive deeper and get more information as you need to. So with that, before we get into the content, I wanted to take a minute to do introductions, and we have we don't have a lot of people. We have a lot of people on right now, so everyone can actually. We have some time that everyone can share who's on. So what I would like for you to do, and I'll go ahead and call you so you so we don't speak over each other, is if you can share your name, the organization that you work with, and one thing that excites you about a summer learning program, or why you're excited about summer. And so can we start with Amanda?
Hi, this is Amanda Hughes, and I work at the Stanislaus Community Foundation, and I'm the program director here at the foundation, and we invest in opportunities to really increase the grade level reading in our county, and we're involved in the Stanislaus Reads Initiative. And summer learning is an area that we've identified as an opportunity. And so we've been investing in programs at 8 different school districts in the county over the past 3 years. We're investing in the technical capacity in our partnership with Nazanin's team. And we're really excited to kind of shed light on best practices that are happening, not just within Stanislaus County, and there are many, but also what's going on across the state.
Thank you. Belle?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Belle Reyes. I'm the Executive Director of Innovation Bridge. We are based here in Sacramento. Our focus really is to bridge diverse collaborative partnerships to promote equitable practices and outcomes towards improving just the quality of care for our young people, our families, and our community. And of course, we like to think what a wonderful opportunity to do that in the summertime. And ultimately and fundamentally, we just love summer. And we're just really thankful to have worked closely with the Partnership for Children and Youth over the past several years, specifically around Summer Matters and some of the localized efforts, including Summer of Service, in partnership with the Children's Defense Fund through the Freedom Schools program. And I'm also joined by my lovely and wonderful colleague, Britt Irby, but I'll let her share her own special individualized intro here shortly.
Thanks. Go ahead, Britt. We can't hear you, Britt. Is anyone else having trouble hearing Britt? Yeah. Okay.
She's having a bit of technical difficulties, but she says ditto. And I'm excited to just work in close partnership with everyone, and echoes we absolutely love summer and the opportunity it just provides for our young people and our families, and working with the various community partners and school districts, of course.
Thanks, Bo. And Nancy.
Can you hear me?
Nancy, yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, wow. I guess I was successful. So I'm Nancy Holland. I work for a company called EAH Housing. We're an affordable housing corporation that's located in San Rafael, California. I'm in Mill Valley, California, and I run the program here at Shelter Hill Apartments, which is one of the many affordable housing apartment complexes. We are a family community, so we have seniors, we have children, and so one of my responsibilities is to run the summer program for kids. And my supervisor, Kristen, suggested that I learn more about what you guys are doing, and so that I could improve our program. Over last year was the first year I did it, and we ran a program that was focused on teaching the kids about engineering, and from a very elementary standpoint. And it was a good program, but I have some new ideas that I'd like to incorporate this year. So I'm excited about new opportunities and a way to actually customize it a little bit, so it's something I'm comfortable and familiar with.
Thanks, Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there might be a few other people that join on as we get started, so I'll try to just bring them in and catch them up as quickly as we can. The best thing about not having a lot of people is that we really will be able to dig into the content. which will also make this recording much more helpful to people. So I'm going to ask as if we could give as full participation as possible in this opportunity to really think through and brainstorm how to use this tool to make summer really an amazing opportunity that it is to impact kids and families in our communities. So with that, in case, I think Nancy, maybe you might have missed it. There are 3 documents in the chat box. So if you can download them, it will be helpful for you to be able to look at them and reference them specifically as we go through. Okay, so the quick CASP, first it stands for Quick Comprehensive Assessment of Summer Programs. And why it is quick is because the National Summer Learning Association with the Summer Matters campaign developed the comprehensive assessment for summer programs together over about 4 years. And it has 90 indicators and 9 domains. So it has a lot of information. And after we developed this tool and piloted it and used it with a lot of different school districts across the country, not just California, with the Summer Matters campaign, we found that while it was an amazing and very in-depth tool, it can be very overwhelming, especially for programs that are just starting out and really looking for a tool to help guide a launch or at least guide a new journey into quality improvement. So rather than to support this quality improvement process, sometimes that CASP hindered it because it was sort of overwhelming and scary for folks. So we dived in with our partners, ASAP Connect, to create the quick CASP, meaning that is we basically cut that in half. So there's 36 indicators to look at instead of 90, with the idea being that this is your introduction. So if you're new to quality improvement in summer, or if you're new to summer, it's a scaffolded way to start thinking about how to look at quality elements in your program. So we basically prioritized those 90 for you and whittled it down to 36. So we do still have the CASP tool that anyone can use, but we always start off sharing the quick CASP tool for folks that are just starting in this process. And then while you see this up here, the continuous quality improvement, this is a cycle that we feel has been really key to successful programs. No matter the tool, if you are using the cycle of quality improvement, continuous quality improvement embedded in your program, embedded in your processes, procedures, calendaring, schedules, you are going to see gains in quality, which means gains and impact on students over time, whatever it is you're trying to achieve. So the bedrock to any quality summer learning program, any quality program, any quality anything, any quality business actually, is this continuous quality improvement cycle. And that's where, and then we'll talk more specifically about where this tool, the quick CASP, falls in and when's the best time to use it. So since we're talking about quality, I wanted to give a moment for people to think about what is the word, when you hear quality and you hear quality program, what does that mean to you? Because that's a good place to start as far as language. What are we all talking about when we think about quality? So I want to give people about a minute or two, and then type in the chat box, what does the word quality mean to you? And then Nancy, I see you can't see the documents. If you're in the chat box and you scroll all the way up to the top of the chat box, I think you'll see 3 documents.
I'm not seeing them.
You know? Okay. Then what I will do in a moment is when it's time for us to look at them, I'll just open them up on my screen so people will have them, and then I'll give you the links that you can download them.
Thank you.
So what does quality mean to you? And then if you can put that in the chat box, and then we'll share out. I want to give everyone a chance to think about it and put it in the chat box so we can record it for posterity. Okay. So can we do the backwards order of how we did introduction? So starting with Nancy and ending with Amanda. Just quickly share your thoughts on what does quality mean?
Start with me. Thank you. So I basically trying to see what I wrote. It's blocking me. Okay. So I thought it might mean an effective program, thoughtful, targeting your specific audience, a sense of preparedness, having really thought out what it is and researched what it is that you want to teach and share with the kids.
Great, thank you. And Britt, I don't know if you can speak, but I think are you able to talk? Yeah, we still can't hear you. So I'll read what you wrote. You said quality is acknowledging that our youth deserve the best, always striving for innovation, high standards, and meaningful, intentional program design. Thank you. And Belle?
Yeah, when I think of the word quality, I think of a continuous cycle of improvement. So I think of practice, and I think of performance and progress.
Thanks. Thank you. And Linda?
So for me, when I think of quality, I'm thinking about the experience for the participant, and that whatever the intended outcome was for them, it being a part of that experience, that it's a positive experience that's actually seeing an improvement upon that outcome.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of great keywords. So thinking about preparedness or planning, quality doesn't happen by accident. There's intentionality there, which the quick CASP is very suited for. The other is outcomes. What is it that you're trying to achieve, and how do you know you're achieving that? So trying to identify those outcomes and how to measure that. You'll also see that in the quick CASP. Acknowledging that youth are the best. So really what I hear there is like the youth being the center, the target audience, and that they're having a voice in the process. So you'll also see that in the quick CASP. And then the other theme that I'm seeing is quality improvement and positive experiences. So both of those are also embedded in the quick CASP. So I think we have a good tool for everybody because it really speaks to all of these elements that were brought up. So so this is the cover of the quick CASP. So when I give you the link to download it online, you'll see this is what you should be looking for. This is what you'll see. And just a quick overview, one thing to understand is it's not an evaluation tool. The idea is not to say that this is a good or bad program. This is not something that you want to, like, it's not like a report card. What it is, it's a way to assess. Assess means to take stock of what you have. Looking at your assets, what are your strengths, and basically where are your gaps? And it helps you narrow down your attention so that when you're thinking about quality, there's a lot of things into quality that we just talked about. And when you're looking at program, you're looking at all the different people, all the different variables within a program. It can be overwhelming to think about what's the thing that I need to work on, so that I'm making sure my experiences are positive, that my outcomes are what I want them to be, and that youth are acknowledged and get what they need. So what this does is it just helps sort of, it's like a radar for you. It helps target your attention. And so you can see right next to each other, where are your strengths and then where are your gaps that might need attention. And it can also then help you even make the connections between your strengths and your gaps, how it's categorized. So we'll when we get into the specific domains and indicators, you might see that. And then the last thing to know about the Quick CASP is that there are 3 components. So the tool itself has 2. One is planning and management, and that's infrastructure. So that's looking at things behind the scenes. And then there's program observation. So this is a rubric that you would take out to look at program in action, because those 2 things go hand in hand. And sometimes we see tools that do one or the other, but not both, which is another reason why we really like this tool. Because it has both the infrastructure, the planning, everything that happens behind the scenes before summer, and then it looks at what that looks like in practice and action, and then it puts those 2 things together. To give you the third, which is an action plan, and then this action plan is basically taking the data from this assessment tool, these rubrics, looking at these different indicators, and deciding how you want to move forward. And then there are different ways to go about doing that. There's a template in this tool for an action plan, but there are many action plans. So it's not, there are many ways to go about it. This tool is one of them. The most important part is that you use an action plan to make meaning of the assessment tool and to make it useful for your program, and so that your students and your staff ultimately benefit from it. So questions about these 3 items. What is the Quick CASP? Okay. So then I want us to think about, so how do we implement a high quality program, right? That's the meat of the Quick CASP tool, is these indicators. So again, you have program infrastructure and the domains that are in the Quick CASP that we look at. So these are the big broad elements that we look at in program infrastructure. There's purpose. Are your goals very clear? What are you trying to achieve with your program, with your activities? Who is involved in informing that purpose and those goals are also all questions within the domain of purpose. The second is program sustainability. If you cannot sustain your program over time, how well can you really do over time? Because we know dosage really matters for student outcomes. If you only provide students programming for 1 week, for 1 month, no matter how well your program was, how high quality, those impacts are only going to last so long or only going to be so deep if you cannot sustain it over time. So we ask questions about how are you getting revenue, how are you building champions, how are you advocating, and how are you tracking your impact to basically sell and market, so that you can have a sustainable program over time and deliver that high quality program to your students over and over and over again, so they do have that experience, and really the impact is meaningful and long lasting. The third is the planning piece. So like Nancy said, being prepared is very important. High quality does not just happen. So these are just questions to consider in your planning process. Who's involved in your planning? What learning targets, what purpose? Are they connected to the purpose that you started out with? So key questions around what is in the planning, who is in the planning, and when the planning happens. The fourth is staff. So again, many variables in program, your staff is also very key. They're the ones implementing the plan. So how you recruit your staff, how you train your staff, when you recruit, when you train, how you provide professional development, how you include them in planning, and how you prepare them to be instructional leaders in your program are all questions that are being looked at in staff. And then the last domain for program infrastructure is partnerships. So one thing that we found in the Summer Matters campaign that I'm sure Belle and Brett also have found in their work and National Summer Learning Association is that partnerships really are about leveraging resources and maximizing opportunities for students. So the more you can partner, the more effective those partnerships are, the more high quality your program is going to be because you're bringing in as many resources as possible, not duplicating efforts to really diffuse the resources in the community. And we all know resources in communities, especially for education and social services for youth, are very limited. So rather than fighting for a pot, we're like, how do we share the pot and do it very intentionally? So the questions around partnership are all around how are you making those partnerships effective and how are you making the most of leveraging the resources that come from those partnerships. So the second piece then is what actually happens in program. So you have the domains of purpose, sustainability, planning, staffing, and partnerships. That's all great, all being done. Now, how is that getting translated once program starts with your target audience? So with your students in the classroom or at school, on the field, what does that look like? Because then that's also a huge place for gaps. That's what you'll see. Like, okay, well, we did all this staff training, but I'm seeing some gaps in how staff are interacting with students, on staff instructional ability. We thought we did all of this great partnership work, and we brought in some new computers or we brought in some new staff, but the plan doesn't seem to be rolling out the way that we anticipated. Or it's working really great with this one partner, but not with this. So you can see some things take shape when you look at program, and then you can go back to your program infrastructure and sort of check the boxes of where their strengths and weaknesses or gaps. The domains for point of service are individualized. So that looks at how well each student as an individual, their needs are getting addressed, how well their needs are getting addressed. The second is intentional. So how intentional is the programming connected to the needs of the student and to learning goals that you've established earlier? And how all of those activities are rolled together. And that there's evidence of that intentionality, that everyone seems prepared and following a plan when they arrive to program. The third is integrated. This is something that is also probably unique in the CASP, and something that the Summer Matters campaign and the National Summer Learning Association has been very, very dedicated to advocating for, is that these programs have more impact and more potential for impact for students when you integrate enrichment and academic. And social emotional learning, when you're really addressing a child as a whole and you're creating holistic opportunities for students to engage in. It comes into play for attendance, for students to want to attend your program. It comes into play when you're thinking about the impact. We want students to learn, but we also want for academic and school success, and we also want them to have novel experiences so that they can have be well-rounded people as they grow older, but also know about, we know that in like reading and math, for example, or even science, the less context, the less real world relevance those things have for students, they will check out. So if we can really broaden enrichment opportunities for students, we create that context and we create that relevance for the academic learning. And then the last is unique program culture. And then this is specific really to summer learning, in the idea that a summer program should be a new and exciting experience. So when you have a unique program culture, you make it fun, you make it a special place to be. And then if you're working with a school district or a housing development, and that's where the program is taking place, you want it to feel like something else than normally happens in their day and normally happens in their year, so that they're excited to be there. So this unique program culture really helps that engagement and that novelty to get students connected. So I'm going to stop there with that quick overview of what is in the CASP, and then see if there are any questions before we go to an activity. Okay. So anytime, I'm going to go ahead and keep going, but anytime there's a question, go ahead. I'm monitoring the chat box as well, so I'll try to stay on top of it. Oh,
I do have a question. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about, in the context of the schools that we've been working with through Stanislaus Reads, and when we started this work, it was, you know, you talked about the integrated piece, and that was something that we observed right away. They were doing either summer school or something fun over here, and they weren't really integrated at all. They were like two separate programs at the same site. So we're starting to see that integration happening at our sites now that we've kind of called that out as a best practice. And we're also seeing the unique program culture. I'd be curious about the individualized piece, like what would be examples of that's really starting to happen? I just wanted to kind of hear your perspective, because I feel like that intentionality and the individualized piece is something that maybe we need to catch up on.
Mm-hmm. So a little bit of that is individualized, is understanding the different types of students you have in your program, and how to meet all of their needs. And that is not to say that you start sort of segregating students like based on needs, but that you're understanding the homogeneity of your the heterogeneity of your students, while you're trying to create a more standard experience. So you want the experience to be for all students, while also knowing what different students' needs. So for example, English language learners. If you know that you have English language learners, even if it's just one or two, you need to make sure, one, that a best practice is that they are not taken out of your more comprehensive program and isolated with other English language learners, but instead it's better actually, and for language acquisition, it's better if everyone is together. But there are ways that you can address how you share a lesson, for example. If you know that one or two of your students are English language learners, so having more visuals, partnering students intentionally, doing other cooperative learning strategies intentionally. Another piece, another one could be having students that have different kinds of special needs or learning needs, and knowing who they are in your group, and then just figuring out, okay, so how is my lesson going to be able to address that student while also addressing everybody else and keeping everyone else engaged and learning, but also meeting the needs of that individual student. So that does take some teaching and instructional, practice and sophistication. But programs can also, if you don't necessarily have the teaching staff right away to do all of that in-depth work, if you see that that's something you can work on, you might want to bring in a specialist to help you develop curriculum and to do some instructional coaching to make your lesson planning and your lesson implementation more inclusive. And then I also just actually want to turn it over to Belle and Brett because they also have a lot of experience and knowledge in this arena, and if you wanted to add anything about the examples of individualized. I think Britt is going to write something for us since we can't hear her.
Yeah, Britt is typing in the chat box.
Yeah.
But I think you hit on some really important points, Anthony. And so I'll just further emphasize that I think one, it's kind of just an understanding of who our young people are, and an understanding of just that diverse needs, and that being both academically, social, emotional needs. But in addition to that, just the cultural relevancy piece. So knowing our young people, but really addressing kind of the whole child needs. So when we think about just the family engagement, what does their lived environment look like? Those are all the things that we take into consideration when we think about individualized kind of point of service in terms of practice and approaches. And then how we, absolutely develop just our programs with that very much so individualized intentionality.
Thanks, Val. That was, and Britt says, another great example from the CASP is the use of multiple grouping strategies in programs. So allowing opportunity for multiple types of learning. So that, the intention on having things visual versus auditory, like less lecture, more visual, or just making sure that you're balanced, having the kinesthetic opportunities as well. Thanks, Britt. So I wanted to actually dive a little bit into the domains here. So I'm going to share. I'm going to stop this, and this is going to be a little technicality here, that I'm going to open up this quick CASP document to share with you, so that we can review what all of those domains are looking at. Okay, can everybody see this quick CASP at a glance reference guide? Okay, great. So here is the big domain of purpose. And then these are the indicators. So what does it mean when we think about purpose? So again, remember that purpose is in the infrastructure side, the planning and management, so things that are happening behind the scenes. So one, is your program grounded in mission and vision? And also, not only is there one, but did that get formed through an intentional process of understanding your community needs? What is happening in the community with your students, with families, with schools, and you're addressing those gaps while leveraging assets and making sure it's what your community wants. So that's one. The second is youth outcomes. So that's being very specific around what do you want to be different for youth that participate in your program at the end. Is it behavior? Is it a knowledge? Is it skill? What is it that you want to have a measurable difference for youth by them participating in this program? And that should be really clear before any other planning starts, because all of your planning decisions should be informed and guided by those goals. Then there's evaluation and evidence. So goal measurement, stakeholder feedback, and average daily attendance. So these are some ways to figure out if you're meeting those goals and within this idea of purpose. So goal measurement, so your youth outcome goals, what are you going to look for to tell you that what you're hoping to change in youth is actually changing in youth? So for example, if it's reading, if it's more self-esteem, if it's more connection to community, what kinds of tools can you use? What kinds of questions, surveys can you identify that can help you see what progress is being made on those goals? Stakeholder feedback. Your program is all about everyone involved. It's a community in of itself. So your staff, your families, your youth, other partners that are involved, whether it's a school district, a CBO, a housing organization, you know, like maybe it's like a curriculum developer or a curriculum provider. Whoever it is, they have some impact and some experience with your program. So understanding what their experience is really helpful in understanding how high quality your program is and where some gaps are. And then average daily attendance. I think this is probably pretty obvious, but if kids are not coming to your program, if your target audience is 3rd through 5th graders and they're not coming, that tells you something about your program. Something is not working. But if you do have high attendance, that also tells something about your program. So they're loving it, right? And then you might find maybe in goal measurements, I don't seem to be seeing as much progress on the connection to community or to service, for example, but everyone's coming. So they're loving it, but something we're doing is not hitting our learning goal. So, you know, that's something that you want to check, and then vice versa. We seem to be making progress on our reading, but kids aren't coming very often, but the ones that are coming are making progress. So how can we address engagement and attendance while keeping what we're doing, which is definitely making gains on our reading goal. So then you have planning domain. And that's the program design. So things to consider: adult to youth ratio, physical activity, 1, that there is some, and then 2, that there is enough, especially for youth in the summer. We know that's really important, and we know that throughout the school year, unfortunately, a lot of schools don't have enough. So if this is what they're doing over their summer, how can we make up for that? Food service, this is all dependent on your program length. But also taking advantage of the fact that you have a program over the summer, and you probably are serving a lot of students and families who get free and reduced price meals over the school year. So think about this as an opportunity to continue that service and that resources over the summer. So maybe you feel like, actually, I only run my program for 3 hours, I don't need lunch. But maybe you can still serve lunch. Maybe that's just the last thing of your program. And how can you work with partners in the community to make that happen? Because that's a need of your community. Total hours of programming is about dosage. So this is research that's led us to believe that, 1, we know that the more you do things, the better you get. And so that is with program experience as well. So if an individual student has 150 hours of programming minimum, we know that there's going to be impact. So maybe you had a 2-week program that lasted 4 hours and you didn't see gains in your reading scores or in your self-esteem scores or engagement to school. Maybe maybe they just don't have enough time in your program. Maybe the program is fine. There just needs to be more of it. So that's another place to look at. The other thing, actually, before I keep going, I just want to say that there's a rubric. So when we get into the tool, you'll see that there's a rubric, so that there's a scale. There's a place for everyone to start, and there's a place for everyone to move towards. So and the descriptions here are the high end, the 4-point on the rubric. This is your golden star, your North Star. This is where you want to aim for. But there's a scale, so you can see, like, okay, well, maybe we're not perfect on program timing, but there's other things that need more attention because they're lower on their scale, and maybe they're going to have more impact based on resources that we have, amount of money that we have. So maybe we don't have enough money to add that many more hours, but we're kind of on the cusp of being perfect to maybe we just need to pay more attention to attendance and student engagement, and we'll get more out of our resources that way. So the rubric, when we look at the tool, just to note that it will really help you calibrate where to pay attention and when, based on your resources as well. So curriculum and activities, staff collaborative timing, lesson plan framework, and use of a certified teacher. I won't say anything about the other two because I think they're pretty self-explanatory, but the use of a certified teacher, we found that especially in instruction, when you embed academics, it is really helpful to have a certified teacher at some point in the process. So they might not be the instructor in the program. They might be a coach over the summer, or they might help develop curriculum, or they might help do some training based on some specific needs of your staff and of your program. So it is not saying that there are certified teachers delivering the lessons or the programming over the summer, but that at some point you have some consultation, some use of a certified teacher to ensure that the academic and instructional portions of your programming are high quality and are meeting the needs of your students. Then we have staff training, so alignment of staff needs and training, a staff training timeline, and then the third, staff observation and feedback. So this is something that I've seen a lot where programs sort of miss it, either because they don't feel like they have enough time or they don't have enough staff to do this. But where I have seen that you can get the most out of staff training, it's in-service staff observation and feedback. So if you have a staff that has the capacity to actually see staff, line staff, interacting with students, teaching students, implementing the lessons, and then giving quick, immediate feedback during, not during the lesson, but like during program time, like at the end of the day or at the end of the week, you will see much more professional development and progress on staff skills than if you just did a training at the beginning or at the end, because they're able to implement those skills immediately and they can see what that feedback is and where they are in their own skills and knowledge. And then the last for planning and management is partnerships. So that's looking at partner staff collaboration. So how are you structuring the partnership, relationship building with families, and then family involvement. So really getting families involved as primary stakeholders. They bring their children to your program because of their desires and their concerns for their kids. So seeing them as key partners and making sure that you're very intentional about how to build on that partnership is what this line is about. So I'm going to stop there and then see if there are questions about this piece on these domains and indicators in the planning and management. Okay. So then we're going to go to the next. So this is where we observe. This is program in action. So individualized. Here you saw the. This is the tailored instruction. So speaking to actually all the examples that we talked about are covered in here. The needs and the learning needs of your students in the program, and then multiple grouping strategies. So as a way to help students connect both with each other and with the lesson and the content in different ways. Integrated. So again, this is where we can integrate whole child approaches, academic, social, emotional, behavior, environment, etc. So the examples here are the integration of academic and development, positive reinforcement. So this is not just about how you interact with students directly, but it's here as an indicator talking about how you interact with students directly. But what it does, it creates a bigger environment of positivity. So it's about creating a broader program school climate, a broader climate in your culture of learning and community. But you'll see it play out in how people interact with individuals. Behavior management, again, so this is how individuals might interact, but it speaks to the bigger program culture. Inquiry-based learning. So this is, in here, this is a great strategy to integrate academic, enrichment, contextual content, cultural relevancy. So when you have inquiry-based learning, the approach being that students really have an opportunity to create the work. The work is based on their own curiosities, their own interests, questions they have about the world. Children, I mean, humans are born curious. Children are born curious. So if you create an opportunity for them to ask questions and then an environment and resources for them to gain answers, they will be connected and they will be learning academic skills as well as other social emotional learning skills. Creative thinking. So how, and just that your environment is fostering and encouraging creative thinking. Youth-produced work. This is how you value youth voice, and also encourage youth learning. So if you can have an intentional and continuous way to show off youth work, that youth can learn from each other, but it also, it's like it's a pride wall, or, you know, culminating event or something. Just an opportunity for students to always see that their work is valued, beyond just doing the work for doing the work, and that there are other people that value that work, that encourages work. And then last is youth voice. So how are you engaging youth so that their voice is heard, and all of the learning is relevant, which is going to lead to engagement and going to make all of the academic learning much more meaningful. Unique program culture. The three that we pulled out are program spirit. So think of baseball games, basketball games, you know, waving our flags and doing chants and cheers. Physical environment, how to set up a space so that it looks like it's a unique and novel place to be, something more interesting. The other thing I want to say about physical environment is creating or including youth voice in that process, because one thing that can really encourage and engage students with your program is erasing lines of sort of property. Like, I'm in this space, it's a school space or a program, a housing space or a community center, whatever it is. If students feel like they're a part of the space, it's their space too. It's not like a space that they're going into that's somebody else's. They are going to feel much more free, much more relaxed, and much more connected to the people and the work that's happening. So thinking about not just using this physical environment to create an interesting space to look at, or maybe even be in physically, explore with tactile things, but also how are you including youth voice so that they have a sense of ownership in the space and comfort. And then transitions and meals. So how are you just intentionally using those opportunities to create a positive climate and culture of learning and connection. And then the last in observation is intentional. So this is, you'll see things like advanced planning. When you walk in, are the instructors ending on time, beginning on time, because you'll know that they're prepared. Do what's happening in the classroom, what is said to be happening based on lesson plans, based on learning goals, the clear expectations from students. That's all about planning. Is everybody on the same page about what's supposed to be happening during this time? Debriefs and check for understanding. When those happen, you also know that your instructor and your activities are intentional. Staff engagement. Do they know what they're supposed to be doing? Are they clear on their role and their purpose in the lesson or in the activity or in the transition, whatever it is? Are they clear about their role? Whether it's leading a lesson or supporting behavior or being a cheerleader, just knowing what it is shows that there's been planning and there's been communication around that plan. And then skill building. Is there intentional skill building? If skill building is not happening, or skill building can only happen if there is intentional planning. So if you do not see skill building happening in a lesson, the lesson might say there might be an objective around skill building, but if you don't see it being practiced, being learned, that something went wrong in the planning. So those are the questions around program observation. So I'm going to stop there and see if you have questions.
I would be curious from your perspective, like when you go and observe programs, what's kind of the low-hanging fruit in a way of, because from our own experience in Stanislaus County, I think when they started, it was primarily rooted in kind of that summer school model, and we started, exposing them to these other ideas. And one of the things we saw is, like, I think program culture was something that really started first, but this, I feel like we see little bits of all of this isolated in different places, and, just trying to move. I mean, dosage is another area that schools really struggle with. And so, I don't know, I'd just like to get your perspective on where you see like easy, low-hanging fruit, and what's like the hardest things for schools or programs to usually get to.
So I'll answer, but I'm also going to invite Belle and Britt to share their expertise as well. I actually think it's a hard thing to answer because it's going to vary based on the program and where they are. So part of using this assessment tool will help people see where to start, because you might find, oh, I'm actually really good on dosage, and maybe I just need to work more on my youth program culture, unique program culture, or individualized lesson planning or skill building, because my students are getting bored or they're not learning as much. So the intentionality behind skill building is what's missing. So that's one. It's really going to depend on the program. And so using the CASP tool as a baseline, if you haven't done something like this already, will really help guide that decision making. The second thing is, again, like based on where you're at, you might want to think about the staff that you have to start with. So for example, individualized and the individualized piece especially takes a lot of skill in instructional skill in teaching and facilitation. And so if you feel like you don't have the right staff for that right now, maybe that's not where you want to start. And so think about where else you can start, and then how to build a place to start in individualized instruction later. But start with who you have. So it might be like, let's just be more intentional about advanced planning and clear expectations and using debriefs, and how can we do skill building better. The other example is inquiry-based learning can be complicated, but you can also set up structures that might be easier for staff to plug into rather than facilitate on their own. So you can think about like, okay, I can see how, especially like if you have older youth, inquiry-based learning is really helpful to get students engaged. So if you decide to go there, what can I do on my program planning side to build more of a framework in my lesson plans and in my training, so that the staff that I do have can just sort of plug and play a little bit more with this inquiry-based learning approach, because that's something we see would be really helpful if we improved on. Belle and Britt, did you want to add anything to that question?
Yeah, I think Britt is capturing in the chat box, but just to add on to what you've already shared, Nazanin, I agree. I think the wonderful thing about the quick CASP is that it really does give us an opportunity with our teams and to do just kind of this quick self-assessment to just then identify where are our areas of strength that we can further grow and build from, but also identifying our gaps. And then based on those gaps, identifying just the process and action steps to how do we stand in those gaps. So who is it that we need to work with, partner with, what are resources that are needed, practices or strategies or different approaches that will further enhance our programs, and of course the experiences of our young people in the programs. But when I think collectively, when I think of the various just domains and those various kind of indicators, kind of our lens to when we go out to programs, we really just simply look at what are the things that we're seeing, what are the things that we're hearing, and the things that we're feeling, right? It's just a great kind of summary. And then Nazanin said it best, you know, when we see young people at program, that's a great indicator that they're, you know, enjoying that experience. And when we're not, or we see just forms of disengagement, you know, that absolutely is an indicator that there's something that needs to be refocused or readdressed. And then I think Britt just posted her comment there in the chat as well.
Oh yeah, I can read that. It says, I think one of the easiest strategies, low-hanging fruit around improving program culture is engaging youth in that process. So having them lead efforts to recreate the space, to make them their own, and having youth develop the way that they start each day, through chants, through routines, and truly reflective of their community and their culture. And one of the more difficult challenges can be integrating the academic and enrichment components. So in particular, helping school leadership understand and be open to learning that looks different than the regular school day. Yes. And that probably, and that difficulty will also vary depending on how your summer program was initiated, by who it was initiated, and who's involved in the planning process. Yeah, so, you know, and then that also will vary from district to district. So you have, I'm sure, like Amanda, you've already seen, you know, that there are some districts, some superintendents who were like with the integrated enrichment and just took it, and then some need a little more convincing. Right. So that's also going to vary from program to program, because in the end, this is all about people. So everything that we do, unfortunately, doesn't have one quick silver bullet, because people are so different and act differently in different groups and have different dynamics in different groups. So, which is also, I think, the great asset of the CASP tool, is that it has that rubric and it has so many indicators that people can really go to where seems easiest or most relatable to them at first, and feel like, and have progress. You could say, okay, there's so many things I see that I can work on, but I'm going to pick these two because I feel, you know, I understand this, it makes sense to me, you know, and after using the tool and seeing progress made, that the idea is that then inspires more innovation and more connection and more commitment to using the tool and doing more quality improvement work. Because it isn't a one size fits all. So I think the CASP has enough variability to feel useful and relevant to many different contexts and people, whether it's a housing organization, a CBO, or a district, but then also has enough detail to help really guide and inform the process. So I wanted to give an opportunity to practice a little bit what it means to use the tool. We are going to spend, I have this like quick video, this 5-minute video, I don't even, actually it might be 3 minutes. So I'm gonna show this like 3-minute video. And then we're gonna go through and talk about a couple of indicators and how we might see them show up in the Quick CASP tool. So give me 1 minute for the technical work here, and then I will and then you will should see the video. Okay.
Summer learning loss is holding back low-income students who can lose as much as 2 to 3 months of learning during the summer if they don't have access to enriching activities and programs.
If that goes on year after year after year, by the time our students end up in 5th grade, they can be behind as much as 2.5 years, even though they are learning well during the school year.
Traditionally, remedial summer school has been the fallback option for districts hoping to address this academic achievement gap. But it often feels punitive, leaving students demoralized and no better prepared for the school year.
Traditional summer school, it's really that drill and kill. It's a remedial summer school program where they're filling in basic skills and students are required to attend, so that really dampers that motivation factor.
Our summer program takes a different view, and we try to make it fun for the students through different curricular activities. We are still academic, but it's looking at the program in a different way because it's motivating the students. It's for all students.
More and more school districts are getting inspired to offer high-quality summer programs that provide engaging academic experiences, include a blend of academics and enrichment that are designed to build skills, foster collaboration between students of all skill levels, promote healthy habits, and last a full day for at least a month.
When you talk about 21st century learning skills, it's communicating, it's critical thinking, it's all the additional skills that students are going to need to be successful in the 21st century. So the students are benefiting from a tremendously rich program. Our teachers are benefiting because they have a lab-like opportunity to practice those skills for the school year.
We find that students who have attended a summer program actually engage in conversations, they're risk takers, they raise their hand more often, they have that confidence.
Every year we do just a little more. There are many ways of turning a traditional summer school into summer learning with not a lot of extra resources needed. It just takes a little imagination and a lot of willpower and willingness to take a look at what you can do.
Take a look at what you can do to leverage the unique opportunity that local control funding provides your school district to build high-quality summer learning programs.
Okay. Sorry, and now I'm looking for, I'm about to open up the rubric for the point of service. So if you already were able to download that, you can open it up, but I'm gonna share it. It's just gonna take me a second to pull it up on your screen. Okay. Everybody see the quick CASP tool on their screen? Great. So this is the tool. So again, when I give you the link, this is the front page. And then there's a user's guide that gives more detail on how to use it. For the districts that Belle and Britt will be working with, they don't need to necessarily dive into the user's guide right now unless they want to. But Belle and Britt are experts beyond. They have been using this tool for at least 7 years. And they have actually been able to really make it their own in different program settings because they know it so well. They've even been able to add and sort of tweak different indicators to make it specific to different kinds of programs. So they definitely are experts in using this tool. So I'm just scrolling down a little bit so you can see what it looks like. When you go online, there's a way to use it on, like, it's fillable, so you can change the scores and add notes here. So you can use the fillable PDF, or you can just print it out and then write notes when you're doing observations. Some quick tips as I'm just going to scroll a little bit down so you can have a chance to look through all of the rubrics with the indicators. But while I'm doing that, a couple of quick tips. One, when you decide to use any tool, like the CASP tool, it's a really good idea to share this with all of your staff, and even other stakeholders like families and partners, so that they understand, one, that you're being very intentional about quality, but two, what kinds of indicators, what do you mean when you say quality, and what does that look like for you? So that when you get some feedback based on this rubric, no one is surprised. The other thing is that it helps ground a lot of your communication around plans and training, because they see where it's stemming from, or at least it should be stemming from a lot of the stuff in the rubrics. Like, oh, I see why I see why there's a certified teacher helping do observations, or I understand why we need to have 150 hours of program, and that's what we're trying to fundraise for example. I see why my program director is so focused on getting some collaborative staff time to plan lessons. So it really gives, it's sort of like my mom said it, but it doesn't matter because my mom said it all. My mom talks all the time and she has tons of rules, but when my friend's mom says it, it means way more. So this is the friend's mom coming in and saying, like, oh yeah, you should eat your vegetables. And sleep is really important. So this is the research behind all of that. So now I am going to, so here's the partnerships. And then again, it's really helpful in spelling out, what does it mean to have a high quality partnership? What are some of the activities that I need to be trying to accomplish so that my partnerships are meaningful for everybody? Okay, so here is where the individualized comes in. So this is where we're looking. Oops, sorry. Oh man, I just, so this is the observation piece. Right here. Sorry, I accidentally pushed the wrong button and it went all the way back up. Okay. Oh my gosh, I did it again. So what I would like to do is to look at the integrated line, and I'm just going to, it was hard, we couldn't really see the youth voice part because of the video. We couldn't actually hear any youth, so we're not going to look at that right now. Here. Oh, this is the other thing actually I wanted to point out really fast before we go into the rubric. So in the observation assessment, one of the great tips that are here is these icons for what to look for, what to listen for, and what you might want to ask questions about while you're observing. So this helps the assessor, the person that's there doing the observation, guide their perspective a little bit. So for example, you will see here in the individualized, there's that question icon that won't be very clear when you're watching the activity is, are you grouping youth in this activity by any specific criteria? Okay, so you might see them in groups, but you don't really know the thinking behind it. And that's part of what you want to know, is how intentional the grouping is. So here's a guiding question, and it's also alerting you that this is something you should be prepared to ask. If you can't figure out the answer in your observation, be prepared to ask it. Okay, so what would you, let's see, if we're looking at individualized and thinking about that video, what would you, just based on what you saw, what would you score? And again, so let's just assume that those were snippets of like 3 or 4 different programs, but let's assume those were all just one program. So how would you score that, and why?
Well, you definitely saw, small groups working together. It looks like there was some sort of STEM activities happening, which meant that they were planned. And, there was some sort of planning that happened in advance to organize the groups. I can't say if I saw larger group activity, but I definitely honed in on what the smaller groups were doing.
So that would be 2?
I would say more, it looked like a 3 to me.
Okay. Anybody have something different? Okay, let's go to another item. Staff engagement. So here you'll see there's 2 icons, something to look for, and then something to listen for. So what would we, if we were just using that video, those clips, what would you say around staff engagement?
So in the video, we saw a teacher talk and we saw a superintendent speak. And so that's always a good sign that the superintendent, clearly was involved in the planning process. But it was neat to hear the frontline staff talk about that they were trying to do something different than what they normally do in the school year, and trying to engage the children in a different way. So that seemed like a good sign to me.
Mm-hmm.
So what would I rate them? It's hard to get from a 3-minute video, Nazmi.
Yeah. This is not meant to be perfect. It's just trying to get a sense of how we use the tool.
So they're definitely a 2. They're meeting the 2. Yeah. If I knew more, I bet I could probably give them a higher score.
And I would say, I mean, based on just what I saw, I would say a 4, because I didn't see anybody not engaged. I didn't see any staff like sitting around looking at their phone or not paying attention or looking like they're bored. It seemed like every staff that was on the video seemed to be engaged and doing something very purposefully. So just based on what I saw, I would give it a 4. Okay, we're gonna just look at one more. Integration. So again, there is some speculation here because we couldn't see exactly what the goals of the activities were, but seeing the types of activities that we saw, how might you rate the integration of academic and developmental focus?
One of the things that I liked is I saw them look like they made paper airplanes or some sort of flying device, and were all lined up, kind of brought about like a competitive nature. But I'm thinking if they made the planes or the flying devices and then actually had fun taking them outside and seeing who could go the furthest, I thought that had potential to be really, show their skills and creativity and then have fun with it. I think, is that what that means with regards to academic and developmental? So, and then they did something else. I thought they were putting something on sticks. I couldn't see what that was, but I like the idea of them being outdoors and doing something active and competitive nature. So maybe on that part alone, maybe like a 3, something like that.
Yeah, and so like one hint here, so in the rubric it says like things to look at. So like our academic gains, such as literacy, math, or science, and then developmental, leadership, relationship building, health. Think of like now the new buzzword is SEL, right? So thinking about SEL development and academic gains, are those happening in the same activity? So the key to integration is that they're not happening, we're doing SEL in the morning and we're doing math in the afternoon. The idea is that it's happening in the same activity. So with that example that Nancy shared, you could say that you could see the potential. It was hard to tell really like how much academic, for example, or how much leadership or relationship building they had, but you could see the potential for all of that happening. They could have, had a physics lesson and then measured their materials when they were designing, and then measure how far it goes in the distance, and then make comparisons and talk about redesign, right? And then if they were in groups and they were in teams and they had there's opportunity for leadership development, as well as relationship building. So you can see that that's a perfect example that Nancy pointed out as the potential. Of course, if we were there, we would be able to answer all these other questions, but you could see that is a potential activity for that. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions about how you might use this rubric. Okay. So we have about a few minutes left, so I just wanted to quickly share where I'm skipping all this because we did it a little differently. Where things go in that quality improvement cycle. So when we're thinking about continuous quality improvement, when is the ideal time to use this tool? So, oh, by the way, in case you're not familiar, so this continuous quality improvement cycle, this specific wording and logo and everything comes from the California Department of Education's Expanded Learning Division, and all of the quality standards and their grant compliance and everything revolves around this specific model of continuous quality improvement. So we have assess, plan, improve, but you might see similar renditions of this with slightly different wording like reflection, planning, and implementation. But essentially, it's the same thing you've seen in many different areas of work, business development as well. The assessment is taking stock of what's happened, using evaluations, using data, stopping and reflecting, and then making meaning of it to then inform an intentional plan. And then this improvement is really the implementation. So when you implement the plan and see what happens. So for summer programs, June, July is when you would have this improvement implementation. And that's when you really observe program in action. And that's the only time you could do that for a summer program. So that element of the quick CASP, that second portion of program observation and using that rubric has to happen while program is in session. It is not a reflective activity. What happened? What do we think happened? It needs to be right in the moment. Then August through September is the ideal time to assess. So you want to gather whatever data you collected, including the observation assessment tool, to think about what happened and inform conclusions that will lead to plans. I will also add here that a best practice, especially for staff development, is to take the observation tool and use it and provide feedback and suggestions for making changes in program within 48 hours. So that is something that Bell and Britt will do this summer with their districts, is that they'll go in, they'll do the observation, and then they're going to give some feedback and the score of their tool in 48 hours so that programs can do something right away. And I think this is especially important when you're introducing the tool, because again, it helps people see right away the efficacy and the value in a tool, and how to use it in their planning for the future. And it gives you confidence in some, things can change, things can improve, but also you see very quickly what you're doing well. You have all of that feedback very quickly. So again, take that and move it, take the information, move it to August, September, do a debrief. This is also around the time when you're going to want to start gathering information on the program infrastructure side. So if you are in a position to start this in September, that's great. If you want to start using this tool now for this summer, and you didn't, and you didn't know about the tool, so you haven't gathered your program infrastructure piece, you can still do it now. It's still very useful information. And so, for example, Belle and Britt will do that still, but it's the ideal when you're using this and you've embedded this into your CQI process, the ideal time is to look at it before you start planning so that it can inform your plans moving ahead. But it is still going to be, if you're using it now, that's fine, it's great, and just make sure that you know that you can do this anytime. And I would suggest that you do it before you do the program observation tool, because you'll get some background and some context, and you could also help inform what kinds of feedback and suggestions for improvement based on the knowledge of the program infrastructure. And then the planning will happen between September and May, ideally. So that's a long time, and so there's a lot of different steps to planning. Oops, wrong way. And this is where you create that action plan based on the feedback, based on your conclusions of all of the data, make the plan. And you've probably also heard from the Summer Matters campaign, and I'm sure you'll hear from Belle and Britt. This is also a plan. This is a team. So as many different stakeholders that touch program to be involved in this planning process, the better. Families, youth, staff, schools, your other CBOs, other folks in housing that might impact funding, potential funders, anyone who you think is going to have any interest in how this program runs and the impact of this program should at some point have a meeting or some kind of input in the planning process. When you work with bigger organizations like school districts or big YMCAs, having your HR and your transportation, your facilities managers, all of those people need to know what's happening in your program at some point. So it is a long process. It is like a long time span, September to May, but there are a lot of pieces and a lot of people to connect with. So the more time you put in, and the sooner you start doing that, the better your plan will be. Okay, so very quickly before we end, what might be, maybe it won't be new for you, Belle and Britt, but what might, based on what we talked about today, what might be one new practice or approach you would do or suggest people do for their summer program this summer? I have this quick poll that it's going to make a word cloud, so it'll be a beautiful end. We could see things that we learned today. So key takeaways, basically, on your approach to summer. You can use your cell phone and text it, or you can use your web browser. I'm just going to make sure that it's running. Did you guys put stuff in?
I think I lost the
You too.
text info.
Oh, okay. Here.
But I would love to share out loud.
Yeah. Yeah, we could just do that. I did this on a webinar 2 weeks ago, and it was so beautiful. Our little cloud, that was like the highlight of the.
Oh.
We're seeing our cloud.
I know from experience from when you shared some of this work with our partners last year, just being exposed to the different models and just the different ways to integrate fun with learning. That like just what you were talking about earlier, Britt, like having like a camp or a chant or something that really creates a unique experience that they don't, so it doesn't feel like that place of school or wherever they're having that program, that it feels like something very different and special that they're included in, I think is huge.
Nancy, can you share?
Yeah, one of the things I tried to incorporate last year, which was my first year teaching it and planning it, was to have music playing, like a certain song playing when they came in. Mm-hmm. So that, because I remember when I was little, there were certain songs that reminded me of things that we did in school and certain projects that were, really sweet. And so I tried to get them to pick a song that, because I had kids that were from like 5 to 14. Mm-hmm. I picked one song that they really enjoyed, because I thought that would just kind of really instill in them a sense of, hopefully it would get them excited. But the thing that I was going to put on the cloud was partnerships. I think that's really important for me, especially because, we're an affordable housing project. And so I want to get them off-site. We're so blessed to be right next to the San Francisco Bay. There's all kinds of great opportunities to marine centers, mammal centers nearby. You can, actually learn about the various animals. Like kayak, if I can get release and liability release, I could get an organization. So partnering with different organizations that can help get them out of here, put them on a bus and put them someplace where they're literally outside of their environment, exposed to new and different unique experiences. I think that was something we touched on earlier, and I really like that. Otherwise, they're just kind of really, I wonder how much understanding they have, or what's really around them. Mm-hmm.
We got Youth Voice. That came up.
What was that?
Youth Voice came up on our screen.
Oh. My voice came up?
No, Youth Voice. I don't know.
Oh, thank you.
Screen.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
And I like to check the Youth Voice, absolutely, always. And I appreciate, Nancy, you highlighting just the partnerships. I think that's an exciting thing for us moving forward this summer with new partnerships, just to better serve and provide support services and new learning enrichment programs for our young people. I think the other piece is just, I think that summer programming is kind of a good morning start. So just thinking about what's a good kind of practice or ritual that really brings the young people together with their program staff to just get their morning started in a really positive way that just grounds them for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So we are ending. That is the introduction to the quick CASP. I am going to share out this recording. Thank you all very much for participating. Belle and Britt especially. And I'm really excited that you guys will be able to work in Stanislaus County with Amanda and connecting with the amazing work that the Stanislaus Reads campaign is doing. Thank you, Nancy, for joining. I hope you have some great ideas and some tools that you can take back with you to your housing agency and all of the partners that you'll be working with. So the other thing that I just wanted to point out, I won't do this quick recap, but I wanted to point out that the Summer Matters website has all of these tools. So I'm going to send you the links to the specific quick CASP tools, but we also have tools that are more drilled down. So for example, we have a staff training timeline of different topics and when to do it. We have example partnership MOUs. We have example planning agenda meetings, so planning team meetings. And we also have examples of trainings and ways to do unique program culture, etc. So if you want more tools that are connected to the Quick CASP, our website is a great place to find them. And you can also look up the National Summer Learning Association, which is a partner of ours. And so when you go on our website, you'll have the connection there. And then Nancy, if you haven't already signed up for our e-news, that's a great way to get information about upcoming webinars, conferences, and as new tools come out or new briefs come out, we publish that and then announce it in our e-news. So you can stay connected that way. So once again, thank you all very much for participating. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, and I look forward to connecting with all of you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Zazanin.
Thank you. Really.